What the extremism, am I right? No, no, but seriously, what the fuck is that? To me, that was one form of radicalization, but I feel like I keep seeing more and more examples of just extremist communities, whether it be online or in the real world. Looksmaxers, tradwives, MAGA, the Red Pill community, neo Nazis, all of these groups are examples of extremism. Very quickly before diving into this topic, I want to clarify my definition of extremism. Extremism itself is a very subjective term. What may be extreme to you might be my normal Tuesday. So, throughout this video, when I refer to extremism, I mean any belief system that actively interferes with the social contracts of anyone. In society, everyone is given some sort of title that comes with certain responsibilities. Students have the responsibility to learn, workers have the responsibility to work, and leaders have the responsibility to keep people safe and direct them towards a better future. These are social contracts, titles that give people a role in society. I forgot to mention that social contracts are not limited to sort of job type of things, which was mostly what I was describing before, and can also be just kind of relationship type of things, like being a parent or a child to a parent. So, yeah, or a friend, right? Okay, so now that my definition of extremism has been explained, let's just go over why, in my personal viewpoints, the groups that I list are supposedly extremist. Looksmaxers obviously try to maximize how good they look, but that obsession often leads to the neglect of other social contracts or duties they have to society. Tradwives glorify surrendering autonomy to patriarchal structures, which disrupts any social contracts a person might have had before giving up their agency. Neo-Nazis actively make it harder for people of different ethnic or cultural backgrounds to perform and act upon their own duties. Despite their differences, all of these groups hold controversial beliefs that disrupt the societal duties of themselves or those around them. So, how can someone look at these ideas and convince themselves that those beliefs are justified? What actually makes extremism appealing? To start, I want to analyze one of the most infamous extremist movements throughout history, the Nazi regime. Hitler undeniably had the ability to draw people in. Otherwise, how could he have stayed in power whilst openly promoting such horrific ideas? One of the largest factors that contributed to the growth of the Nazi regime is the unfavorable circumstances Germany was facing. After World War I, Germany's economy collapsed. The Treaty of Versailles forced the Weimar Republic to pay massive reparations to the Allied powers. And in an attempt to manage the debt, the government printed enormous amounts of money. This caused hyperinflation, rendering every citizen financially unstable. People were unsure when their next meal would be, where they would sleep, and whether they could survive long enough to see a better future. In those desperate times when anger, fear, and grief pervaded Germany's zeitgeist, people wanted an answer to their problems, and Hitler offered one. He started his campaign with promises of a better future, neglecting to mention the advent of fascism and persecution. But then he started introducing these possibilities through laws and propaganda. He blamed Germany's suffering on minorities such as the Jewish population. He promised that once Germany eliminated its so-called enemies, the nation would return to prosperity. What he provided was an easy, simple solution. And in times such as Germany's economic ruin, straightforward answers become irresistible. That is a contributing factor to the popularization of radical beliefs, the comfort of certainty during chaotic times. Extremist beliefs give clear explanations for suffering, simple enemies to blame, and promises of a better future. Even when explanations are irrational or immoral, they offer emotional relief in an otherwise scary and confusing time. Similar patterns appear in modern extremist communities. Take black pillars, for example. The black pill community is an internet subculture defined by nihilistic and deterministic views on dating, genetics, and social status. Looksmaxers, incels, and generally groups within the manosphere fall under the black pill denomination. Many people actively participating in these spaces are drawn in through personal insecurity, isolation, negative experiences, and lack of identity. Dating apps, social media, and influencer culture have intensified feelings of competition and inadequacy, leading to a perfect storm of unrest among young men. And just like Hitler and the Nazi regime, these communities provide simple explanations for complex problems. Instead of confronting the messy realities of human relationships, self worth, or social skills, the black pill offers a different answer. Your genetics determine your value, and society is rigged against you. Then, with that idea having been planted, a solution is posed. Whether it be bone smashing in order to find a romantic partner or to marginalize women in retaliation of their supposedly predetermined fate, these answers offer a solution that dilutes discomfort. For someone struggling emotionally, that certainty is comforting, even when it comes at the cost of harm towards oneself or others. Okay, so that's just one piece of the puzzle. Radicalization usually occurs in unstable contexts. Got it. But what else leads people to join these communities, and what keeps people from breaking away? Psychology always plays a massive role in societal issues such as radicalization. The third wave experiment was essentially a simulation of living as a regular citizen during the Nazi regime if it were to take place in a high school. The goal of the experiment was to understand how and why people chose to support such vile acts during Hitler's rule. I won't go into too much detail on the experiment, but I highly encourage you to research the topic on your own. Participants within the WAVE community were rewarded with improved grades and a higher status, similar to how Hitler promised a golden age and gave status to people who worked for him. With the temptation of perks, more and more people began joining the third wave, turning what was once a minority into a majority. Majorities undeniably have more power over minorities, and the higher population also contributed to more members joining. Humans have the natural urge to fit in because we're innately social creatures. We evolved to seek out belonging because being in a tribe improved chances of survival, and that behavior of seeking acceptance bleeds into everyday life. Mob mentality occurred amongst students during this third wave experiment because people abandoned reason in order to fit in. They embraced the extremes of their leader, a trusted teacher named Mr. Ross, and blended in with peers who also promoted those ideas. Peer pressure was also a huge part of why the movement continued. Students would force others to join the movement, threatening violence or exclusion should they refuse. With so many students sharing these ideals and the possibility of ostracization or violence looming over people's heads, breaking away from the movement became dangerous. That fear of being outcast and the rewards of status or grades made it harder to stop. So students abandoned logic to stay safe. Their leader, Mr. Ross, was giving them safety, status, and grades for conformity. So why bother questioning their actions? The same exact process happens with extremist groups. That's why no attempt to end the terrible actions of Hitler gained enough traction to really make a difference. And it's why many people are struck with these beliefs, because rejecting those ideas might lead to the community rejecting them. But circling back to lack of identity, that is a key factor to why people end up joining extremist communities in the first place. My first exposure to the third wave experiment was from a book titled The Wave. Written by Todd Strasser, the book explored the consequences of the experiment through the perspectives of students and the teacher who incited the ordeal. In the book, there's a character named Robert Billings, who at the start was your typical loser outcast in high school media, but his progression throughout the story is what interests me most. Robert Billings is a character overshadowed by his widely recognized and respected older brother. He is bullied for his appearance and introvertedness. In his school, he was never equal with his peers until the experiment had started. Once the wave had started, he was delighted, and as the book goes on, he eventually becomes a bodyguard for his teacher. Robert directly benefited from the movement because it gave him a purpose. It gave him an identity outside of loser. The wave created equality amongst peers. It allowed people to gain acceptance for simply joining the movement. After years of bullying and exclusion, Robert finally found community through this silly experiment. But once the wave came to its conclusion, Robert was once again the outcast loser from the beginning. The book nears its end with Robert sitting alone in the auditorium, crying as his teacher watches from a distance, wondering what to do. Identity is the set of qualities that differentiate you from another person. One important part of identity is sense of purpose, what gives your life meaning. Sometimes people don't entirely have a clear, developed sense of self. They simply float around going through the motions of everyday life without knowing what they want to work towards. People with superimposed or shallow perceptions of their own identity are extra susceptible to radicalism. Extremist groups, as we've gone over, give easy answers and courses of action to achieving a certain goal. The goal radicalized individuals latch onto give a sense of purpose, meaning, to an otherwise lost soul. Some people's identity simply makes it easier for them to adopt extremist ideologies. In the age of the internet, it has never been harder to develop a strong identity. Social media leads to comparison, unrealistic expectations, and emphasizes the need to seem cool amongst peers. People have a hard time finding what they like, what their identity is, because the internet praises conforming to trends, and outliers are condemned for being different. When people feel unable to express themselves or unsatisfied with their perceived identity, they join other potentially harmful communities because it allows them to express themselves and have a sense of purpose. Humans are complex creatures, and sometimes we do stupid shit. Extremism is no different. It is stupid shit that harms people. But we can lessen the need for radicalism by simply being better people. Allow others to explore and find their own tastes in art, activity, and work. When you see someone sharing their passions, don't put them down. Shine a light on them. Leave a like on some dude's terrible drawing of Spider-Man that they posted on social media where they acknowledged its poor quality. Encourage people to chase their dreams and be authentic. Check in on those you care about. Find a new hobby instead of scrolling for hours, and be mindful of how your behavior impacts others. One thing I forgot to mention is that at the end of Todd Strasser's The Wave, Mr. Ross went up to Robert as he cried. Mr. Ross comforted him and invited him to share a meal sometime down the road. He gives Robert a second chance to find himself, to talk, to feel accepted without the wave, without any titles or assumptions of his character, because Robert Billings was never a bad person. He was just a desperate kid who didn't know how to change his situation. So maybe, after some time, Robert will be able to find himself again, and share what he loves to his peers, and be accepted for who he is, and not what title he was given. Wow, that took way longer than I expected it to. It was like 5 months to write the script. I started when school was in, and that took a really long time. Then I finally got it out now. Man, that was my first kind of dip into the video essay genre, which I actually really enjoy. And it was really fun to make this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. I slightly regret choosing such a heavy topic as my first kind of dive into the genre, but I'm really proud of how this turned out, and I'll catch you in the next one.